have like 6 pens. 6 pens in my car.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to call to order the September 15th, 2014 City of Stillwater City Council meeting. If you'll please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. We do have 2 proclamations this evening. Okay, our first proclamation this evening is in connection with Adult Day Services Week. Adult day centers in the state of Oklahoma are providing professional and compassionate services in the community as an alternative to institutional living for adults. And whereas through this service, adult day centers enable physically and cognitively impaired adults to receive needed care and services in a community setting. And whereas adult day service centers provide a coordinated program of services, including restorative and functional maintenance of skills, rehabilitation, skilled and preventative care, and individual and group activities. And whereas Stillwater has been served for 31 years by a nonprofit adult day health care center called the Life Care Center, located in the First Christian Church of Stillwater, that provides daily individualized programs which offers participants the opportunity for enriching educational, therapeutic, and social experiences in the community, thus assisting them to stay in their own home. And whereas the Life Center also provides respite, assistance, counseling, and educational support available to all caregivers in Payne County. And whereas the Adult Day Healthcare Association of Oklahoma and the National Adult Day Services Association have designated September 14th through 20th, 2014 as National Adult Day Services Week. Now, therefore, I, John Bartley, Mayor of the City of Stillwater, Oklahoma, do hereby proclaim the week of September 14th through September 20th, 2014 as Adult Day Services Week in the City of Stillwater and urge the citizens of Stillwater to honor and celebrate this special event.
I'd just like to take a moment to thank the City Council for the proclamation and to thank the citizens of Stillwater for all their support for this program. Thank you very much.
And our second proclamation is a anti-text and drive proclamation. I did not see Gary Bayless. We'll just work without Bayless. Whereas 98% of American commuters know sending a text or email while driving is not safe. And whereas nearly 50% of commuters text while behind the wheel. And whereas more than 40% of commuters who text while driving reported the activity as being a habit. And whereas a driver that sends a text message while driving not only jeopardizes his or her own safety, but also the safety of passengers, pedestrians, and other drivers. And whereas the safety of drivers and pedestrians is a chief concern of the City of Stillwater. Whereas through the itcanwait.com, Facebook, Text to Pledge, Tweet to Pledge, and other events, more than 1.8 million Oklahomans have committed to never text and drive. Therefore, I, John Bartley, Mayor of the City of Stillwater, do hereby proclaim in the City of Stillwater Drive for Pledges Day, September 19th, 2014. Don't text and drive. Okay, that's going to take us down to the consent dockets, and we have items A through D on the consent docket. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent docket? Not, is there a motion?
Thank you. Motion to accept the consent docket. Second.
Motion second on the consent docket. And that's approved 5-0. That's going to take us down to public hearings. And our first and only public hearing this evening, people comment regarding or map amendment rezoning 65 acres at 1615 West 12th Avenue. Mr. Dorman, did we obtain good notice?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Dennison.
Good evening, Paula Dennison in Development Services with you this evening. What we have before you is a request to rezone the property that is outlined in the black and in the hatched area. This is the entire approximately 65 acres. The reason for the non-square area to the south is that is the creek itself. The area that is outside of the flood hazard area is this that is in the hatched area where you can actually see the aerial underneath. The very pale white between the aerial and the light blue line, that is the 500-year flood hazard area, and that is not currently regulated by FEMA. The area from the darker gray from the pale blue to this pale blue is the 100-year that is regulated by FEMA. And then south of this area that goes down to the creek, that is the floodway. That is the area that FEMA prohibits development in. Typically, the only thing you will see if any development occurs at all in the floodway are sewer mains, sewer trunk lines, because on a gravity-fed system, that's usually the lowest portion that can be gravity-fed. So the request is to rezone the property. Currently, the zoning is agriculture, which is the green area, and RSS, which is the more beige orange area. The request is to rezone it to office. The findings, it is consistent with our C3, which is our comprehensive plan. There is office zoning in the vicinity, and any development on the property must comply with the floodplain regulations that are in effect. Office zoning, for your information, is in here. This is Copper Creek and Enclave, and along the south side of 12th Avenue is some office. Stillwater Medical Center has come in even further east of that and rezoned some of their property office. So that's what the request is.
Is that a road at the top of your map?
Yes, this right across here is 12th Avenue. Western is over here on the west side of the property. Anything else while I'm standing up here?
Where are the ball fields? Still having a little trouble.
See the
getting
exit
on.
sign?
Exit sign.
Way over there. The pink on the left is Fountain Square Commercial.
Oh, here,
I
yes.
think the Fountain Square.
That's the pink.
Babcock Park is going to be in this vicinity. And then you have Southern Woods way off the map.
It's sort of behind Fountain Square.
Yes, this is Fountain Square here. West Haven, is that the facility that's located here? Western and 12th Avenue.
And there's that church next to that. Okay.
Yes, and the church.
I'm oriented. What is the blue?
The blue is the city of Stillwater public land, where a lot of the creek is running through. When 12th Avenue was redone a number of years ago, was widened, some of the drainage rework occurred on this piece of property in this vicinity.
Okay.
And here again, the stream, that's the actual stream
Got it.
tributary.
The other side is residential behind the offices on 12th Street.
On the north side of 12th, yes ma'am, there's residential.
How about on the south side of, to the east of that? Yes, isn't it
This-
residential too?
It's mixed. There's office, and then there's single-family residential, and then the southernmost piece is multifamily. That's where those fourplexes, the individual fourplexes are constructed. So it's quite a mix of uses going on in that area, from office to some commercial, public, single family, and then the multifamily residential, and then the hospital with their property to the east and all the plans that they have there.
So Paula, what else would be consistent with office? You could build other things than just office in that zoning if we were to grant this zoning, correct?
Yes, sir, you can. Couple of things: permitted uses, child and adult care services, churches, educational or schools, banks, healthcare and social assistance, professional administrative offices, and then any public administration. With the specific use permit, which would require a revisit through the Planning Commission and to the City Council. Different levels of accommodation: bed and breakfast, hotel, motel, beverage service, food service, parking lot garage, personal and laundry service, recreation, and research and development. So there's a lot of things. They're not broad in the uses. They're pretty complementary to each other that are allowed in the office district.
Can you go back to the floodplain photo just for one more second? You said that at the bottom, the dark gray, that area can't be developed because of you said typically like sewers and stuff right in there?
This area is designated by FEMA as floodway.
Okay.
Development is prohibited in the floodway, and the City of Stillwater has adopted an ordinance that also prohibits development in the floodway. This darker gray area in here running the center of the property is the 100-year floodplain, and it can be developed under compliance with the adopted regulations that we have governing the 100-year floodplain.
Perfect. Thank you.
Paul, I forwarded some questions about underlying storm sewers and associated easements or rights of ways that were installed. Can you address that question?
At this time, since this is strictly a rezoning request, we don't get into the specific how much development of the land, what engineering is going to be necessary to develop the land. All of that will come with a proposal, as will the evaluation of not only the flood hazard areas that will be affected, depending on where the total amount of development occurs, but we also evaluate access, trips generated, any of the easements that are or possibly will be needed for the development. So those will be looked at and evaluated at the time that the actual development is proposed, not as part of this rezoning request. But Dr. Whittenberg and I did discuss that email, and he has asked for the opportunity to respond directly to that concerned citizen and to have a conversation.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Dennison at this point? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. We will open up our public hearing, and we do have 2 requests to speak. And our first request to speak is from Roger Gose.
Roger Gose, 113 East 8, just here on behalf of the applicant, who's also with me, answer any questions you might have.
Is there any questions for Mr. Gose or the applicant?
Thank you.
And our second request to speak is Don Greiner, excuse me. Oh, applicant, okay. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Greiner? All right, thank you. All right, we don't have any other requests to speak, so we'll close the public hearing and ask Ms. Dennison to come back up and give us Planning Commission's recommendation.
The Planning Commission is sending to you a unanimous recommendation to approve the rezoning request, excluding the portion that's located in the designated floodway. And I can go back to that map if you need me to.
All right, any questions from Ms. Dennison? All right. Seeing some looks up here. You guys got any conversation or comments before we get to a vote?
I had drainage questions, but I think that they were answered and would be part of a floodplain study that they have to comply with, so that'd be because it is a floodplain. It's a little bit more concerning.
So if we make a motion, our motion's gonna be to approve it minus the amount in the flood plan, correct?
I think that was Planning Commission's recommendation.
So that's my question. So
Yeah, Planning Commission's recommendation was to accept findings and recommend City Council approve proposed map amendment, except not rezoning that portion of the property within the designated floodway,
so that would stay agriculture?
whatever it's currently zoned.
Okay. So this 65 acre, or, never mind. Yeah. Okay. Go on.
Mr. Mayor, one thing I would, just observe, it's good to see that we have a request to rezone as we further develop along 12th Street. And again, we're seeing some development as a result of the city investing in a road improvement. If you think about Western and 12th Street and all the activity and the residential on the north side that's been happening, it's just another indication that when we take care of the infrastructure, economic development will happen. So it'll be interesting to see what's proposed for the site. I would move approval.
Second?
Motion to accept Planning Commission's recommendation. And that is approved 5-0. Take us to general orders, and the first item under general orders is a report from the Western Payne County Ambulance Trust Authority. Mr. Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. I'm Jerry Moeller, the president of Stillwater Medical Center, but I'm here tonight in my capacity as the chairman of the Western Payne County Ambulance Trust Authority. We call it WAPCATA for short, and it was created, just a little background. This was a timely, I think, point in our history to give a report. It's been November of 2012 since I reported, but a couple things have happened. And a little history, if you don't recall, is that the trust was created in 2010 after numerous task force advisory committees. Councilor Weaver is certainly aware of one, Vice Mayor Weaver, sorry, and Dan Galloway as well, city manager. We all served on those, and looking for an alternative to providing ambulance service besides the city fire department. It was created as a public trust with both the city and the county as beneficiaries. We had 5 members appointed at that time, and the city of Stillwater appoints a member of the Payne County OSU, Stillwater Medical Center, and the city of Perkins, or the city of Glencoe. They alternate. The original 5 board members were Gary Clark, representing OSU, Bill Sasser, Payne County, Rick Jarvis, representing the city of Perkins, myself, and Rex Horning, representing the city. Present board members now are Randy Elliott from the city of Stillwater, Ann Matoy, just appointed for OSU, Harlan Wells from Payne County, myself, and then James Morrow from the town of Glencoe. LifeNet from Texarkana, Texas, had been providing the EMS service since May of 2011 when it was awarded to them after competitive bidding among 5 other providers. This last May, we just completed our 3rd year of operation. This service has matured and stabilized to the point that it's functioning very well for our city and surrounding areas. The relationship with the city and the fire department is very good. We've had some recent positive developments. Performance-wise, we've added an additional 24-hour staff vehicle to the 3 that were functioning. We have 3 stations now on North Boomer, West 51, and South Perkins. 2 of our units are stationed at South Perkins. The 2 developments have really helped us financially recently. One is when Noble County passed a ad valorem tax and sales tax to help fund the ambulance service in Perry. They were providing all the service. Because we provide some service area in Noble County west of the airport and near Morrison, they pay us to do that, and we've always provided that service. But that's about $100,000 a year that they pay us to do that. But a really big boost was when the Central Rural Electric Co-op decided to include our subscription program in to all their members. Many thanks to David Swank and their board. It was wanted for the residents in rural Payne County, but we get about $200,000 a year from that. So we're in the best shape financially we've been in a long time. We serve, I don't know if I mentioned this, but serve about 60,000 people. Our service area is all of Payne County except for East Payne County. That's about 700 square miles, and the city of Cushing provides the eastern part of Payne County. We were at a point where we asked a consultant, Healthcare Visions, and Steve Athey, he's a consultant we used originally, to do an operational audit, and he presented to us at our last board meeting. He thought the results was very positive. In his words, the system design and oversight, the selected contractor, and the stabilized funding have all coalesced to provide improved care and transportation and a stable outlook. LifeNet is meeting basically all the required and promised service to the delivery points with only a few exceptions. That exception would be rural emergency response. We're trying to get within 16 minutes, 15:59, and we presently are at 89% of the time. We're trying to be 90% of the time. And so some of the balance of that money will probably work with some rural providers, get them trained with equipment so they can be first responders, so that they can respond before our ambulance company does. We also may replace a couple of the vehicles that the city provided us. They're kind of aging, and so we'll use some of that extra money for that as well. If you see, very briefly, there's a packet, and this is to take with you and look. If you want to see our response times, if you want to see our volumes, LifeNet 911 call volume, the third page shows you where our calls are coming from, how many responded, how many transported. We also do a medical audit every month, and you see here a report on acute coronary syndrome and the primary complaints report. So the last sheet is our balance sheet, and so whereas last time I reported we have $100,000 balance, now we have about $330,000. So things are going well, and hopefully we're making you proud. So anyway, that's my report. And does anyone have any questions?
Jerry, I thank you for the report. I think it's pretty informative. It might be, I'm just saying it might be a good idea to put this very first page, the LifeNet response time compliance, because that was a matter of contractual agreement with LifeNet, and it just shows the community that they're meeting their obligation, and it might be good for us to put that on the city's website. Secondly, would it be a problem? I would love to see that operational report that Mr. Athy did for you.
Oh.
Bean counter, I like to read those
No,
things. So
listen, you deserve it, and we'll get you that.
I'd like to read that.
He gave us a verbal report, and
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought he had a written report.
but he just sent me the draft yesterday, and so we'll have it within a week.
Okay.
And so, would the whole council like to see that? Okay, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your time.
Just a curiosity question. I don't know if you might not have that, but how does our response time fare to cities of our size?
Compared to what?
Just other cities around our size with?
They are about the same as Tulsa, and when we did our rural response times, it was just a big guess because we have no idea. At 700 square miles, even adding another ambulance is not going to get you to 90%. Probably it got us pretty close, but I would say because when we put this out to bid, we had probably one of the best consultants in the business help us draft the proposal, the request for proposal, that our response times are right where they ought to be for a community our size. Would you agree?
Yeah, that was
Joe?
the whole point of bringing him in, is we wanted to know like-sized cities,
Yeah.
what is the appropriate response time that we should expect a contract vendor to deliver. And that's why it's important that we see these numbers and make sure they're in compliance.
And I
That's
just
on par with what other communities would be doing.
I just noticed Tulsa had lengthened a couple of theirs. It's interesting, there isn't, there are now, science will, or the data will tell you that within 5 minutes is when you really need to be there. We do that well in Stillwater, but, so, in the rural areas, does 16 minutes make a difference, 17? Not really, not unless you can get an ALS, a first responder there within 5 minutes, where you make much of a difference on the quality of health care that you provide, so.
Any questions for Mr. Miller?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
All right, our second general order is a proposal from Stillwater Tennis Association. Mr. McClenny.
Just a minute. Okay, John McClenny, External Services Director. Council budgeted $400,000 this fiscal year to rebuild the tennis courts at Couch Park. And we began discussions earlier this summer with the Tennis Association to talk about how we were going to proceed with that project, what we would use as surfacing and things like that. And as we continued to discuss, the issue of the courts being out of service for a while came up, the issue of this being a really short-term solution to a much longer-term problem, and we began further discussions on how we might use the same funding to solve the longer-term problem. And from that developed the proposal that the Tennis Association is going to present to you tonight, and staff has worked closely with them, and we do think this is viable. So I'm going to introduce Henri Wahara and Jeannie Homer with the Stillwater Tennis Association, and they're going to present this proposal, and then I'll come back and give you staff's recommendation.
Thanks, John. Do I just click on this like over the PC? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Henri Wahara. I'm the president of the Stillwater Tennis Association and a member of the 1974 C.E. Donart High State Runners-Up in Tennis. I'm here with many of our STA board members, including Virgil Nichols, who happens to be my former high school tennis coach. Where are you, Virgil? Right there. Hopefully he's going to have his face splashed in the front page of the Stillwater News Press in a week or so, because he's responsible for running some free family tennis clinics for the STA later this month. We also have quite a few STA members here, including OSU Professor of Architecture Jeannie Homer, who will be presenting the details of our plan a little bit later. First of all, on behalf of the Stillwater tennis community, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the council and the city staff for including funds to improve the city's tennis facilities. We're very grateful that the tennis courts are finally receiving much needed attention. So the reason we're here today is to present a plan for your approval that will address both the short and long-term issues that we face with the city's tennis facilities. Rather than simply rebuilding the existing courts at Couch Park and maintaining the status quo, the STA wanted to investigate whether there might be a better solution that could be found for the community under the given budget constraints. We took into account the following points in coming up with our proposal. First, due to the long-term damage sustained by all the tennis courts in town over many years, every one of them need to be rebuilt from the ground up. This results in rebuilding costs comparable to new construction. Of course, it depends on the site that's selected, but it does apply in all our cases. If we go ahead and rebuild the existing courts, the city would only have 4 daylight courts at Sunset Park for the school tennis programs, the STA tennis leagues, many active seniors who are actually attending here that use the Sunset Park, and junior development. That presents a big problem for us. And then simply rebuilding would still not address the lack of courts, the quality of courts and quantity of courts to support a city the size of Stillwater with a population nearing 50,000. We're talking about 8 total courts right now, of which 4 would be out of service. An inner-city benchmark survey that we conducted last year by the STA showed that Stillwater is woefully underserved and nowhere near where it needs to be in terms of quantity of tennis courts. The city's own 2013 C3 master plan calls for an appropriate level of service of around 23 tennis courts. Now, I'm not asking for 23, but realistically, Stillwater should have a minimum of 12 quality courts to support the ongoing activities of the tennis community, with at least 8 in one location so we can host some USTA and OSSA sanctioned tennis tournaments. Okay, so we looked at what the possibilities could be by constructing new courts with space for expansion. We considered various locations in town, including Southern Woods, Boomer Lake, Hamilton Field at Couch Park, and Cimarron Plaza. As some of you know, I have a fondness for Cimarron Plaza from last year when we presented a proposal then. Unfortunately, Cimarron Plaza was quickly ruled out after conversations with Assistant Superintendent of Public Schools confirmed that the site would still be unavailable for near-term use. And so I'm disappointed, but that's reality. We canvassed the tennis community for feedback and for their preferences. We considered the pros and cons of each site and concluded that new courts on Hamilton Field at Couch Park would be the best choice. And the reason for this is locating new courts there would be the most cost-effective because of the existing infrastructure already at Couch Park, along with the minimal site prep work needed to do the new construction. So moving on to the plan itself, the objective of our proposal is to build the most attractive, inviting, yet practical and functional tennis facility for the city of Stillwater within the existing budget. The plan calls for construction of 5 to 6 new lighted courts on Hamilton Field adjacent to the existing courts using the budgeted funds for this fiscal year. We allow for future expansion of this facility to 9 to 12 courts to address the community's long-term needs. So this plan addresses both short and long-term needs of the community while still being the least disruptive to ongoing activities. Central to the plan is the renovation of the abandoned Hamilton Field House for repurpose into a multi-use rec clubhouse facility rather than expend funds for its demolition and debris removal. We included features for junior development, including 10 and under lines and backboards to help in qualifying for a USTA facility grant. We stretched the budget as much as possible by reusing existing lighting, as well as reduced design and engineering costs, courtesy of STA member Jeannie Homer's expertise. As mentioned, we also will be applying for a USTA facility grant. I'm confident that the implementation of this plan will result in a very attractive addition to the city. And now I'll hand it off to Jeannie, who will provide you with the details of the plan that we've been working on for the past 3 months.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I want to start off by just orienting us in Couch Park to let you know what location we're talking about. North is to the left. Here, this is 12. You have the pool building right here, the existing tennis courts, of course, the existing baseball field. And then you have the Hamilton Field House right here, and this is where the previous football field was. We were intrigued by this site and the location because of the opportunity of potentially renovating that Hamilton Field House and making it more of a recreation center that maybe the larger community could use. So I wanted to orient us here because a lot of our plan is based on that field house. When we zoom in, this is our phase one with the potential of 6 courts here, depending on our budget. You can see a renovated field house here with an extended community porch that could be a shaded area for social activities or to watch tennis. You extend it into a terrace that could again be a community gathering space. If middle schoolers are playing or high schoolers are playing, the parents can sit and watch. We have other seating here. And you could see the layout is kind of surrounded by that, and it's based on that field house. This is, the layout is dependent on USTA regulations. And talking with the Stillwater Tennis Association, the members really liked the idea of the intimacy that these couplet courts could provide. Instead of taking 4 to 6 courts and kind of putting them all in a line, these are a little bit more intimate. Some other features is you can, orchestrate how much security you want with the fence around. We would reuse lights from the existing courts. We can use low maintenance landscaping. Anytime you have courts, you have a lot of hardscape, so it's nice to balance that with some softscape. We would also look to have some sunshades with benches, which is really important in our climate. Long term, we would love to have 12 courts, and it extends here. We studied how much we could fit within the size of that football field, and this is about what we came up with. So we're not tearing out any major trees here, but it's a great site, especially for tennis courts. The siting is so important in the grading. Then you have a nice, easy drainage toward the back, toward the creek, which is so important for court design. You can see it's still focused on that field house here. If we zoom in on the potentials of the field house, this is one option that we came up with, kind of integrating it into one more functional building, still open in the middle with glass, to enclose a lounge, concession shop area, more of a recreation center. Again, you can extend this, push this wall back and create a shaded community porch. You can reuse plumbing to create a women's and men's facility that you can access either from the outside or from the inside. And on the other side here, you can have anywhere from 1, 2 to 5 administration offices with some storage if that was desired. And here I'll leave you with an image of what this recreation center might be. This is, cleaned up. We opened up the center here with some glass. You can see right through it to invite the community in. And we incorporated some bright contemporary colors that could appeal to users of really any age in the community.
Thanks, Jeannie. In conclusion, we thank you for your support, and we hope that that this plan will meet with your approval. Thank you.
We're all available for questions, and staff's recommendation is that the council authorize us to move forward with this proposal, and we would come back at the time that we have bids back for construction, and I think it's a very viable idea.
Just to make sure I understand what I've heard, it sounds like the funds we've allocated already in the existing budget, our tennis friends and city staff are saying instead of repairing existing courts, let's try this new plan, and let's try to build out new facilities over there by Hamilton. Why would I not be for that?
I don't know.
I'm bad about that. This is exactly what we want to see happen, where city staff and community members on a common interest get together and come up with a solution. I just think it's a great idea. So I commend you all for working on it.
I think one of the things Mr. McClenny and I have talked about, and I'm sure he's talked to the tennis association as well, is that if the council were to want to pursue this, the way it's designed, it's very easy to develop the bid package with add alternates. You can have it with the field house with 2 fields, 4 fields, 6 fields, all those increments, so that as we look at all of the bid options, you can fit this year's phase to the budget that we have, and then, which would also help then in planning future years' budgets for the next phase. So it makes it a very flexible project.
And that's how we plan to bid it. Basically, the construction method that we're going to use, putting down a new set of tennis courts, is the same as putting something right back where Couch was. And so we're going to bid it so that a number of courts can be added or subtracted based on how the bids come in and what the budget will allow.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, and I don't want you to take this as negative, but one thing that I didn't hear, which seemed like an obvious omission, there was conversation of youth activity, school activity. I didn't hear you say that the public school system is ready to support this and maybe partner with us and provide some funding for the future expansion.
I know that
I think
Henri
that would be very good.
Henri has talked to Stillwater Public Schools, and maybe he would address that.
I talked to the public schools. They've already got plans to build some new facilities solely for the high school and junior high programs on Cimarron Plaza. Obviously, that's not scheduled for a few years, but that's their intent, is to place some funding toward that. And so I'm not sure if they would be as, one of the things that we tried to do with this is to make it more of a community tennis center rather than focus just on competitive.
I would encourage that. We
Well,
wouldn't
we-
spend our funds in a way that limits you to accommodate the school system if they have their own plan down the road.
Well, that's why I was trying originally last year to try to convince the city and the school system to work together to build that facility at Cimarron Plaza, but obviously their time frame is pushed out quite a bit. So, and our short-term needs are quite urgent. So.
I would just encourage to continue to try to find some way to work together, because they're going to have some short-term needs also.
We can certainly do that.
What's the timeline for when you would like to complete 4 or 6 or?
Well, the timeline for the construction of the tennis courts themselves is this year. Since it was budgeted this year, we're going to go ahead and try to get that out to bid and get that started. The Tennis Association is going to go after a USTA grant for the renovation of the field house, so that would be a later phase.
And who would run the field house? If there's concessions and things like that, when would it be open and who would be responsible for it?
We have talked about the possibility of doing another public-private partnership with the Tennis Association so that at some point in the future, we would have another agreement where they would run the field house.
Let me be a little stronger than what Councilor Noble just said. That's the only way something like this is going to work, is if this product does not cause an increase to the city budget. Same approach we've taken in every other recreational-based activity. And so unless we are very confident that we're going to be able to pull off a public-private partnership to support these additional activities, I don't want us jumping off a bridge that we're not going to be able to land on the other side.
Well, I'm confident that we can. Talk to Henri about it some. He could address the tennis association
We're talking about
side.
building courts right now. We're not talking about.
We're not talking about.
I agree, we're not talking about the operation of the field house, but it's one of those, if we don't feel very confident that we're gonna be able to get a public-private partnership for the operations, much like we've talked about and put into place with baseball, basketball, where it is open to the public, it is, and I definitely appreciate the not focused just on competitive. Greatly appreciate that, because that was a core element of our agreement with Stillwater Area Sports Association. They must provide recreational, not just competitive. And so before we spend money to be heading down this path, I want to see a lot of nods out there that, yes, there is going to be a partnership that is going to be created, because the city cannot take on a tennis club. That's not what we're designed to do. The city cannot run a tennis club well.
I think from the city side, staff side, and from the tennis association side, we would all agree with that it's not something that the city should be taking on running the tennis club. And we have discussed the public-private partnership idea, and I think that we could continue to do that simultaneously with developing this. And like Councilor Weaver said, we're building courts right now. The field house won't be an issue until the tennis association gets a USTA grant, so we've got time to deal with that piece of it.
So does this require council action? The funds are already appropriated. It's a question of the location and the purpose.
I think what the recommendation was for them to proceed with this conversation. I actually have another question, and I haven't heard all the background on all the different sites, but I greatly appreciate those conversations of looking at alternative sites.
Right.
Greatly appreciate that, and I'm not looking for the list of pros and cons. That's not what I'm looking for. That's for Park and Rec Department to be hammered out, and if it needs to be something different, then let's be talking about that. But one question I do have is, and this is kind of more for us to all grasp, the budget we put out there was to rebuild the existing, because we heard from multiple people how bad the condition is. It's kind of one of those, not knowing timeframes. I mean, I'm assuming everyone's grasping and accepting the fact that those existing courts down in Couch, those aren't getting fixed also this year. It's one or the other. And so my question with that long rambling way to get to my question, has there been conversation on what's the plan for those 4 courts?
Well, for the time being, they're going to be left in service until we have the new ones up and running. Eventually, they would be coming out of service. We would go ahead and take them out because they can't be repaired. They would have to be rebuilt, and they don't really fit the direction that we're going with the long-term plan. So that would be the longer-term plan for those. And they're also going to lose their lights because we're going to take those and put them at the new facility. And in terms of...
Are you saying that this is a better plan than us going over and taking courts out of service and rebuilding them?
It is.
It gives us additional usage, and basically we're using the same money.
Right. And since we're doing something different with the money than it was originally budgeted for, we wanted to come back to council and make sure that was all good with you before we proceed.
I think that's the primary purpose of this tonight, and that is you approach the budget to rebuild some existing courts. After working with the tennis association, and all, we think this is a better alternative, but we want council's blessing to build these at the Hamilton Field location. Talking about the possibilities that the tennis association have beyond that is part of the justification. So I don't think there's any really a formal action required of the council other than consent to make that change in the intent of the budget and to build new fields instead of repair the old at the Hamilton location. So that's our intent, to go ahead with that unless there's objection.
Probably my last question would be, okay, I'll let you go ahead.
Well, we know that public-private partnerships work. This is a great idea. This is a great idea. When you said that the tennis courts were built around the field house, as that's the main thing that concerns me a little bit, that if we don't have some kind of agreement in place, we build some fields and then we don't have an agreement, the private partnership, can they get to the fields without going through the clubhouse? Can the clubhouse come down if we don't find someone to run it?
I look at that plan, that field house can be, a plaza that you walk straight across to the court.
So I think that we need to, I'd just like to see us move forward with a plan for a partnership in writing so we can get this done. It's a great idea.
We can definitely work on that.
Let's,
Come on, McClenny.
and the tennis association, just let's get this done. Let's get this done. This is great for Stillwater, quality of life.
And again, this is good government when citizens can get together with our staff, hammer out a solution and a proposal, and move it forward without a lot of votes and a lot of falderall.
Alderall?
I said that, didn't I? Sorry.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
We specifically made sure there was folderol included in this proposal, so it's there.
Okay.
All right, so, I mean, there was a staff recommendation. I mean, does it actually need a vote, or?
Well, there's been some suggestions here, and I appreciate the suggestions, so maybe we need to get some clarification. I think, and I totally agree with what's being said about the importance of the agreement. I think that to build a full agreement at this point may be a little premature, not knowing the outcomes of some of the grant applications, how many fields we're going to build with this year's budget.
Courts.
But how many courts. But what might be plausible, I would suggest that we negotiate with the Tennis Association and get a formal letter of intent that to see if they have an intent to enter a public-private partnership with the advent of the proper facilities. Then that gives us an assurance that if those facilities get in place, then we have a full commitment and intent. Just a suggestion. I think it's going to be difficult to write a full-blown
I'm not looking for a signed public-private partnership before you start investigating bids. That's not what I was intending, especially on the court side and the court construction, because that's 100% city. And we build it, it's just like it is at Couch Park right now. until a field house opens. And as soon as we start getting into maintenance of restrooms, sale of goods, sale of beverages, things like that, that's when it needs to be somebody else.
And tournaments, and
Yeah.
scheduling of tournaments, and
So, I
all
mean,
of
I'm
the
not looking at
things
this
that-
agreement need to be done until they're wanting doors open and cash registers ringing.
But if you need a motion to reappropriate the funds from rebuild to new construction at this location, I would so move.
It's not really a reappropriation, it's just a redirection of the appropriated funds.
Get after it.
Second.
Got a motion and a second?
We have a motion and a second. I do have one more question, and this is just, let's tie this bow on it and make sure we're all right there. Were there other plans in the works for the old Hamilton field that you know of?
No.
I don't know of any, but I'm asking the question.
The only idea was to leave it open so that it could just be open park space.
Okay.
So there were no other
We don't have
formal
enough of that,
plans
do
for
we,
it.
Joe?
Yeah, because we don't have enough open park space.
Yeah.
So in your professional opinion, this is the best use of that property with our constraints and what we want to do?
I think so.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for whatever this,
Rebudget the
head this
funds.
direction.
That's right.
all right, any other questions? All right, got a motion and a second. That's approved 5-0. Okay, that's going to take us all the way down to reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman, do you have anything for us?
Nothing to report tonight, sir.
Mr. Galloway?
Nothing other, one thing I would mention, since we had the public hearing on the zoning a little earlier, I've had discussions with Paul and asked her to take a note to put on the land use committee of the council. At one time, there was included in our zoning was some flood zone zoning. We don't have that in there specifically. I would like to at least explore on our zoning map to designate all of the FEMA floodways, since you can't develop in it, to clearly give it its own non-developing zone, so to speak, because if some of the existing land use zones overlap it implies you can use it, and you really can't. So I think it's something we might want to look at cleaning up in our land use code. So land use committee, that'll be coming in for discussion.
Appreciate that. Okay, anything from the council?
No, sir?
One thing, the first two OSU football games are in the can now, and as many of you know, we did have some cooperation with the city staff and OSU staff on routing traffic, and we're getting some great reports from fans that they appreciate the effort. It greatly expedited their exiting, and so I just want to thank the staff for all they've done. It's the real test will be down the road when we're playing somebody like Texas to the wire, but still, the signs are good that we improve the traffic, so I appreciate that support and cooperation.
You guys got anything?
Happy birthday,
Oh, yeah.
Vice Mayor Weaver.
Oh, boy, all day long.
All day long.
Thank you.
And then the only thing I have is starting, I think it actually opens next week, but this Thursday, the Sherrard Museum is opening up new exhibits, Notorious Payne County. And I believe, Counselor, I think you're featured prominently in Notorious Payne County. So anyway,
confused where that was going.
Thursday, there is a reception from 5 to 7 at the Sherrard Museum. So anyway, that's a good part of our community. Okay, upcoming meetings, anything? I'd like to tag on to what Mr. Galloway said about the flood zone, putting that on the zoning. This was discussed actually at one of our economic development meetings, and so I'm going to ask you to get a land development code meeting set up. And one of the topics I would like on there is, and Cody's already left, but the regional drainage as opposed to tract by tract is something I want land development code to attack. So we've got two flood water issues land development code needs to be talking about. Anything else for upcoming meetings? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn city council?
I move to adjourn city council.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn city council. It's approved 5-0. City council is adjourned, and we will call to order the Stillwater Economic Development Authority meeting, September 15th. And there are 2 items on the agenda, items A and B. I wish to remove either item. Now, is there a motion on the consent docket?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion is second on the consent docket. That is approved 5-0. That's going to take us down to general orders. Item A. Mr. Galloway.
Well, that's my, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to step to the podium. Here's copies of what I'm going to put on the slides.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Chairman and trustees. We've, over the last year or year and a half, we've had several of the visiting sessions of the City Council and also some study sessions of CETA, talking about visions for the future of the city, and many of them relate to economic development. And back in July, late July, we had a specific study session on economic development. Mayor, you led that discussion that evening, and we had several items that were identified by the trustees or the council in terms of economic development goals. We were trying to get the pieces together for developing a city economic development policy. So this evening, I wanted to report a little bit on that, follow up to that, give you an overview of what we are doing in economic development and what direction you want to take in what we will be doing. Now, oops. Well, anyway. Trustee Noble already mentioned it. Spoil the surprise. No real gifts, no birthday cake, just the thought that counts.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Now we'll get back to business. But I'm going to talk a little bit about our policy and about economic development program. I'm going to show you some things in slides that you as trustees nor the City Council have adopted as policy yet. These are going to be some interpretations that staff and I have made thus far. These are proposed things for you to think about and discuss. And the first is a policy statement for economic development. Taking into account all the things I've heard trustees say thus far, if I were to summarize that in a statement, the City of Stillwater and the Stillwater Economic Development Authority Trust, CETA, are committed to the growth and sustainability of the economic well-being of the community, its residents, its businesses, and its institutions through the creation of new jobs, increased cash flow into and within the community, improved property values, improved municipal government revenues, and increased opportunities for Stillwater citizens in the area of employment, housing, shopping, dining, entertainment, and overall quality of life. And that's a pretty generic statement, but it says a lot. And I think it's a statement that I would like for the trustees over the next few weeks to give some consideration. If you see ways that that statement should be modified to better describe what Stillwater's policy is for economic development, we could manipulate it. But I think at some point it would be nice to adopt what we could say this is CETA's official economic development policy for our community. This is a suggested one based on what you've told me so far. In your last visioning session, the council identified 5 focus areas of economic development. You identified social, cultural, and recreation development, industrial manufacturing and primary jobs development, retail, dining, and entertainment development, residential development, and tourism and visitor destination development. Those were the primary areas that were discussed at our July 28th work session. They were the same areas that have come up in several discussions in the past from City Council. Now, although each of those 5 areas that you've identified, they all relate to the well-being of our economy. But all 5 of them are very different. They're not the same kind of areas at all. And I think to be successful in each of those areas, we have to have unique programs and techniques for each of those 5 areas. The same tools won't work in all 5 areas. efforts in one area can support the others, but not one single program can accomplish all of those things. And I think we need to try to sort that out. And I think you'll see that a little more clearly as we go along. What is our current economic development program? The City of Stillwater and CETA operates 4 primary economic development initiatives, and we'll talk about those. All of them are under the oversight and direction of the city's Economic Development Trust. That's you as trustees of CETA. The City Council has designated that responsibility to CETA, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. All economic development programs are funded by special restricted taxes or from some of the city's discretionary general funds. Both are used. The funds are appropriated in the annual budget by you as City Council, and when you appropriate those, you appropriate them and designate them for transfer to CETA, because CETA is the seat of all things economic development in the city. And you as trustees then set the guidelines and the budget and the direction for the various initiatives in economic development for the city. It's funded through hotel tax, bid number 1 assessments, and use tax, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We have 4 major initiatives in the city program. Manufacturing, industry, primary job recruitment and retention is one of our primary objectives or initiatives of our city program. Secondly, and these are in no particular order, destination marketing department. We have a consumer business development department, and we have a business improvement district number 1 department. Those are all 4 initiatives of the city's economic development program. Let's talk about each one a little bit so you know where it is and who does it. Manufacturing, industry, primary job recruitment and retention. We do not do that in-house. That is not a city staff assignment. The city for many years has contracted with the Stillwater Chamber of Commerce to carry out that function fully for the city. The city, of course, supports that effort, works in close conjunction with the chamber, but the chamber maintains an economic development program with chamber funds and with the contracted funds by the city. So when we talk about the city being involved in primary job recruitment, industrial job recruitment, and when you as trustees want to set objectives for seeking new primary jobs, new manufacturing, new corporate activities in the city, the chamber has developed a strategic plan and staffing to accomplish that under our contract with them. Those are not the kinds of plans we would work on here in-house, but again, we would support those. The contract that we have with the chamber specifically addresses areas of activity within that description. Our destination marketing department, this is a major division of economic activity in our city. Events, conventions, and other tourist and visitor markets to Stillwater. The division has been known for a long time as the Stillwater Convention and Visitors Bureau. More commonly, today it's referred to as Visit Stillwater. It's operated today as a city department. It annually develops a plan to market Stillwater and its amenities as a destination. The difference between, I don't know where that buzz, if we can get that.
It's being worked on.
Maybe I'll work on it. But the destination marketing it does create an economic influx into our community. It's a little different in it doesn't create the kinds of things that some of our other economic development programs do, but it does accomplish the primary goal of economic development. The primary goal of economic development is to increase flow of dollars into our community, stimulate circulation of dollars inside of our community, and expand the growth of dollars inside of our community. That's what economic development's about. Consumer Business Development Department, the Office of Consumer Business Development was formally established in 2012. It's been around a little over 2 years. It operates under the guidance and authority of CETA. The primary focus of this division is to promote and encourage the growth of existing consumer businesses. Again, we want to work with our local businesses that want to expand their businesses, local businesses who want to open additional branches or new businesses in the community. That's our first and foremost goal, is to work with those local businesses to develop those. Secondarily, we want to encourage growth in consumer businesses from developers who have an interest to make investments inside of our community. For example, our recent TIF district, where we have an outside investor is going to invest $13 million in this community in construction that would not have been invested here before. That money, much of it will circulate in the community and bolster the economy. Although sales tax generating retail is a major focus, the term consumer business, we use that intentionally when we develop this program, because not all things important to our residents as consumers, as spenders of their disposable income, not everything they want to purchase is taxable. And this program does have the ability to expand to assisting businesses develop that are not necessarily sales tax based. Our primary focus is sales tax based. But office development, which can create additional employment, some specific types of residential development that are of a commercial nature, we can assist with. So there's many things we can do in this division, although, again, the primary focus is retail sales tax business. The fourth division is the Business Improvement District number 1. We don't have number 2 and number 3 yet, but I think there are some people interested in discussing other possible bid districts in our community. This goes back to 2007. We had a lot of support. We had support from over 200 property owners in this district because they had to agree to be self-assessed. They are assessed an amount annually based on the value of their properties. That money is very restricted, much like some of our other funds. It can only be used for 7 specific criteria that was spelled out in the ordinance that created the district. And the bid board was appointed, and their job is to ensure that all of those funds are spent only for those purposes. It is basically, in essence, to promote the redevelopment of our downtown. It's to promote investment in our downtown. It's to promote the creation of shopping opportunities, dining, recreational opportunities in the business district, and develop a thriving central business district. It's been around for a little over 6 years, going on 7. I think we've had multi-million dollars invested downtown. I think the bid district is working, and one of our other programs. Now, there's some things I didn't mention in dealing with those 4 focuses. When you discuss focus areas, some of them overlapped with other divisions and other city programs. For example, the focus on social, cultural, and recreational, those affect our economy, but they're not necessarily economic development initiatives. Focus on housing development. Again, housing is a very critical part of our economy, and the city may want to deal with different aspects of housing. It may not be an economic development activity, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Again, they affect the economy, but they, in and of themselves, are not retail, they're not manufacturing necessarily, they're not visitor attractions, which is the focus of economic development programs. These areas are primarily focused in departments such as Park and Rec, Development Services, Transportation, Utilities, and our other programs. And there's other agencies in the city that affect those. For example, if the city wants to initiate development of some quality of life cultural centers in a community, if those cultural centers are a viable money-making endeavor for an investor, it would be a program of economic development. If it's a cultural service we as a community want to provide our citizens and support, but it's not necessarily an economically viable adventure for private entrepreneurs, then it would be more of a public-sponsored program that we would develop as the city of Stillwater as opposed to the CETA Trust. And it would be done through parks programs, through development of facilities, or other programs in the city. In addition to having 4 focuses of our economic development program, the city also recognized we're not the only game in town. There are other organizations in our city and community that are very much involved in aspects of economic development. And in 2013, the city encouraged an establishment of the Stillwater Economic Development Advisory Council. This was established through a memorandum of understanding between the city, Oklahoma State University, Stillwater Chamber of Commerce, and the Stillwater Industrial Foundation. Through that memorandum of agreement, all of those entities have 2 members representing their entity. We meet on a monthly basis. The organization is maturing as it goes, and I think it's becoming more and more valuable. The discussions that are held every month, all 4 of those entities share with the others what directions they are taking in economic development, what programs that they are undertaking that might relate to the others. It helps us to coordinate and support and identify areas we can work together on economic development. We also recognize that there are many other entities in our community and in the state that relate to economic development programs that we coordinate with as well. Although they're not direct members of CDAC, we do coordinate with Stillwater Public Schools, Meridian Technology Center, Career Technology Department of the state, and Stillwater Medical Center, and many others. So there are many, many people involved in economic development. There's a lot of coordination that takes place. But that is the basic structure. As far as what we spend as a city on economic development, we'll go through these very quickly. The bid district, again, is based on assessments. The assessment is somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000. That's what the property owners pay. That's the bulk of the operation of the bid program. The city did agree that we provide any of the staff expenses over the first $40,000, and we provide the office space, telephone, all of the support functions. We also share other departments, of course. Our marketing and public information office supports the bid district, and we do provide staff support to the bid district. But the bid-specific programs are funded through the assessments from the property owners. It is city money, it's city tax, but we do allow the bid board to make recommendations on its use. The Visitors and Tourism Department is funded by a hotel room tax. Again, much like the bid district, it is a city tax. It's the tax that belongs to the city, but the ordinance that created the tax is very specific on what it can be used for. It can be used to basically to attract people to come to our city for meetings, conventions, conferences, special events, whatever reason. The entire purpose of that division is to attract dollars into our community, and those dollars are carried here by visitors. Use tax is a sales tax on products that are purchased not in the city but out of state. Primarily construction goods and others that are purchased out of state. When we adopted the use tax several years ago, over 10 years ago, it was originally adopted as an economic development funding source to help a joint project with OSU and the Gallagher-Iba Center. That commitment, when that commitment was reached, the recommendation was for the council to transfer the use tax to CETA and maintain its original economic development intent and leave that to the trustees of CETA to determine the use of those funds. We operate from that source of funds, the contract with the chamber and our internal consumer development division. Again, the city council appropriates those funds, transfers them to CETA. CETA budgets those for those 4 different programs. To give you some idea of what that amounts to, in 2014, the original budget for all 4 elements was $1,631,000. Budgeted $929,000 for the CVB, $200,000 for the contract of the chamber for primary job recruiting, $265,000 for Business Improvement District Number 1. Again, they had some accumulated funds from previous years. Consumer Business Development Department was $236,000. That was the initial budgets. We Actual expenditures at the end of the year were significantly less than that. We only spent $1,159,000, and you can see how that was broken down in those agencies. For 2015, our budget has been trimmed back a little bit. We recommended, and the trustees, the city council appropriated, and the trust adopted a budget for $1,183,000 for operation expenses of our 4 major areas, $600,000 for destination marketing, $200,000 for primary job recruitment, $207,000 for the business improvement district, and $176,000 for consumer business development. The blue bars show you what was budgeted for those 4 divisions in 2014, and the red bar shows you the current year's budget amount for our 4 programs. So when we talk about economic development, whether it's a CETA or whether we're talking city council, we don't just have a single economic development program. We really have 4 major economic initiatives or sub-programs operating under economic development. And as I was saying earlier, when you think of each of the 4 and their specific objectives, we have to match up, I think, the goals and objectives with their toolbox. In other words, I think we can certainly expect Consumer Development Division to generate economic projects that are economically viable for investors to make money and generate revenues in our community. We should have objectives which expect that the primary and manufacturing and commercial jobs will create large, significant numbers of living wage jobs. That's the focus of that program. And destination marketing, again, is just to simply attract more and more people to come and share with us in our community, our various attractions, and meet here and have conventions here and spend money here. Again, at your meeting in July, you identified a lot of areas. There's a lot of fine print on this. The council, through extensive discussion, identified development incentive criteria. You talked about non-sales tax incentives. You talked about financial considerations of our projects we work on and ethical considerations. As we talked about earlier, no single program, I believe, can be everything to everybody. We need to examine all of the criteria that you have identified. It's a very good set of criteria, and we need to match it up. We have a long, long list of many things that we want to accomplish, and I think we need to focus and look at those, which of our 4 programs can accomplish which sets of those objectives, and which of the criteria apply, how do each of those criteria apply to each of our 4 major programs. There is no definite answer. There's a lot of subjective judgment as to where these criteria will fall, and we need a lot of guidance from CETA about how strong each of the criteria will be utilized in each of the 4 programs. If the staff in these 4 divisions, where we have staff in 3 divisions, we have a contract in the primary job. If we expect the contractor, in this case the chamber, or if we expect the 3 different city staff departments to accomplish what is expected, I think we need to really focus what our expectations and goals are for each of those programs, and to make sure that we're not putting the wrong, make sure we're using the right tool for the right job. We don't want to ask the electricians to do a plumbing job. That's the way I see it. This next chart is way too much detail for the presentation, and it wasn't intended to discuss this in presentation, but the next 2 pages, on the left-hand side, these are all of the criteria that you as a group identified at several of your sessions. You really focused in on the 28th. What I have done on this chart is a preliminary, and again, this is not definitive. This is my opinion only, and I want you to take these and look at these, and we're going to have some subsequent meetings to see if we can reach general agreement of CETA where these are. But as I looked at each one of these criteria, for example, the first one on the list, it says develop corridors and zones. Well, I think when we talked about that, I think we were talking retail zones. But when I look at the 5 programs, and I've got them in 5 columns, consumer business development, the bid, manufacturing jobs, CVB, and then other departments. I put the bid as number one because by its very definition, we had to define a special taxing district specifically for economic development. It was all about creating a zone. But I think on retail and development particularly, we've recently created a TIF. There may be a need for future TIFs, or there may be at least need to be zones that we designate as primary focus zones for retail development. So I put consumer business development as the second most likely program to develop corridors and zones. Primary manufacturing and jobs, it's mostly our industrial zone property. It's already there. But there may be other projects they have, but I think that primary job recruitment is less focused on locational zones than the others. And destination marketing, we want visitors to come to every place in the city, all of our areas. We don't have specific zones or districts that we want to focus on. In many cases, all 5 programs may relate to a criteria. It really gets you to thinking when you say, okay, which of the 5 programs is the most likely to use that criteria? And go through that. When I went through that thought process, I think it's good for all of us to go through that to better understand each of the 4 programs and what the expectations are. And when we can convey those expectations to staff, I think we're going to have much better results. So I'm not going through these charts tonight, but again, those are the items you identified on the left. This is my subjective ranking and professional ranking of which of the 4 entities I think would be the most likely to use that criteria and which would be the least. You can look at those, and again, these are not necessarily a recommendation. I'm sharing my opinion on that, and I need CETA's feedback on those at one point. So in summary, you identified 5 focus areas that relate to development of our economy. The city supports 4 major economic development initiatives aimed at different components of the economy. City departments other than economic development and other agencies in the community also affect those 5 areas that you've identified. The City Council has identified numerous criteria, objectives, incentives, parameters related to economic development policy. That's that long list. We have focus areas identified. You identified, by development over the last 10 years, we've developed our 4 initiatives. Been a lot of city councils involved in developing that initiative, including this one. You've identified objectives and criteria. What we need to do is match it all up. So in summary, what I'm going to recommend is that you as CETA trustees in the very near future consider adopting criteria and guidelines for each of the 4 major economic development initiatives. We being you and I as administration need to take what you want to do in each of these 4 areas, and I need to clearly outline that for those 4 programs and say, Angela McLaughlin, here's what the trust expects to happen in consumer development project, economic development. And I can say, Amy Jo Frazier, this is what CETA expects to happen in the bid district. And I can say, Lisa Navarcall at the Chamber, in carrying out the city's contract, here's what CETA's expectations are in primary and manufacturing recruitment. It's only fair that all those people know exactly what your expectations are. And I want to help you get there. And so this, what I'm trying to do is build these tools. I know it's a lot of detail, and so I think we've had some success with the council and CETA committees. My only recommendation this evening is that the chairman would appoint 2 trustees to serve with me and some of our ED staff as we go through each program. Go through this criteria that you as a group have developed, sort through it, discuss it, match up the criteria with the 4 programs, at least in the recommendation you can bring back to the full trust, and that we can adopt as a formal City of Stillwater Economic Development Plan and policy. With that, we'll be able to develop some very detailed strategic plans in each of those 4 areas and have some targets to aim at. So with that, that's all I have this evening, and be glad to entertain questions.
Questions from Mr. Galloway?
Not yet.
Just a lot of information.
That was a lot.
I greatly appreciate, this is the first time, to my knowledge, let me put it that way. To my knowledge, this is the first time that our economic development programs, procedures, the who, the how much, the what, this is as concise and precise a statement that I've ever seen. And I think that's been part of the problem, is that we haven't had that. And I appreciate it getting to this point. Let me make sure I understand on the big chart. The big chart you've put together. Here's my, do I understand it correctly? That going down the left are what we talked about at our study session, the different criteria or the different issues, concerns, what was important. Then going across the top are our programs. You made the statement, it's interesting to look at which tool is the right tool. I think it's just as important which tool is the wrong tool.
Absolutely. That's probably a better way to look at it.
And by example, and this is why I want to make sure I'm on the same page by saying that, when we look at, and I had a great example and I already lost it. Well, never mind. Is that a good way to put it also?
Yeah, it is. I'm hesitant about choosing examples because they always come out wrong. But for example, if we all, I think, agree that the community needs many more employment opportunities for skilled labor, trained labor, professional, degreed persons to retain our college graduates to work here, and skilled labor that people make living wage jobs. That's really, really important. I don't think CVB is going to create those jobs. I don't think the bid district is going to create those jobs. And I don't think new retail development is going to create those jobs. But I do think the new retail development and the bid is going to create a lot of mid-level jobs and a lot of entry-level jobs. And the more entry-level jobs you can create in this community, you're going to drive up minimum wages. Right now, we have more people looking for entry-level jobs than you have positions. The good news about Academy, for example, when they're going to hire 125 people, some people say, well, yeah, but they're not high-level jobs. Yes, but they're putting a greater demand on that level of position, and that's going to begin to create a higher demand, and it's going to drive those wages up.
Well, I would argue that they're going to have a manager and they're going to have assistant managers.
Oh, no, I'm not saying they won't.
So it's not all going to be.
But some, there are some people in economic development who say we don't even count retail jobs at all, but they are very valuable in the community. You need all levels.
Dan, you said that these are basically your first passes at trying to assign a value in each category. Would there be any, I agree with John, by the way, this is a good summary of our total landscape, but I wonder if there'd be any value in putting like Lisa Navarcall on the spot and asking her to assign values based on her experience and her expertise. Maybe it would be valuable.
I'm sure she would do that.
You know?
I do it.
I want us to do that.
I'd like to expand that out. You've named 4 people that are functionally the head of each of those 4.
But we have experts in each column as well.
I would love all 4 of those people's input
Absolutely.
on these, because there may be a big misconception, and by the way, here's my example earlier that I forgot. Aquatic Center Sports Facility, and you have the chamber at a 4 or 5. Man, I'm getting old.
3.
You want my glasses?
It's a 3.
You know, I may want your glasses.
It's
Point
a
being, we may sit up here and go, you know what, that's right. The chamber really, that should be a number 4. They're the 4th one down the list I'll be working on.
Yeah,
The chamber may
that-
totally disagree with that, and I'd love to get that input. And it's one of those, the destination marketing, at the same point, it's on there as a 3. Their attitude may, no, we ought to be number 1 in that. And so I would love to get each of those
Well,
different people's input on it.
It's not
What
so
I'll-
much, it's where they set a priority.
Exactly.
We could have 1s all the way across the page if it fit their mission, in my view. But I just would like Angela's opinion, Amy Jo's opinion,
And Christie's.
not
and
that
Lisa's.
you didn't nail it. Maybe you nailed it perfectly.
I don't think so. I think I got close, but I don't think I got it perfect. But, no, and I agree, I think that's, I think, of course, we'd love to, I think all of them would be more than glad to do that. I'll send them the blank framework and ask them to do that, and we'll share it with all of you. But again, I think that would be tremendous input for an ad hoc committee, for a couple of the trustees and myself to sit down one day and we have a meeting with Christy Morrison, one day we have a meeting with Lisa, one day with Angela or Amy Jo. And then we may want to bring them together, but I think we need to make sure we all know who's handling what part of the program and that you all are comfortable with that. Then I think we can make even more successful. I think all 4 of them are doing some wonderful things, but I think there's a lot more that can be done. And I think it's going to take a lot of support and direction to get there.
But if they're a part of the team in developing that, it'll be more accepted. And so I think it just adds value to the effort.
I do like that idea, and I do like it, the way that we broke it out, a couple months ago, or it was about 6 weeks ago, when we kind of broke these things out, and then looking at what is the right tool, because I know sometimes I am guilty of, let's do it now, let's get it done right now. Well, maybe this project isn't the right one to accomplish that goal, and this is a
Well,
good reminder.
to be totally honest, that kind of hit me through our sessions, because, I mean, all the people I talked about in these programs, whether it's Christy and Angela and Lisa, myself, and Amy, we all work with this every day. We know exactly who's doing what. And when I begin to get input from the council, or the trustees, I was thinking, ooh, this doesn't really fit with what we're doing. Maybe we need to make sure everybody understands all 4 programs. I'm not saying that you didn't. I just wanted to double check to make sure the public and you, all of us are on the same page and make a lot more progress.
I like having all the pieces in the puzzle right next to each other, because I know sometimes I just think about the one piece we have pulled out and are looking at.
And I think, and this sounds pretty basic, but it's a true statement when we're talking about economic development programs, economic development. I know the city does a whole lot of other stuff. When we're talking economic development, we're talking those projects that some private investor is going to invest in this community in a profitable way that helps everybody in our community, citizens, government, everybody. It's all about the money. That's why we call it economic development. There are a lot of other things we'd like our community to do that will make economic development easier and will support economic development, but it's not economic development per se. So that's where we have to go to other departments, to other sources and say, how do we change our community to make the folks doing economic development more successful? We can't ask the folks doing economic development to make those changes. So that's the difference.
And one other comment, and it's just my opinion, but when we did this without knowing how city staff was going to use it for. And so now that I see it again, it might also be good getting our economic development experts to comment on whether or not these are all appropriate. There might be some on the list that our group would say, this isn't an area of focus you should be spending any time. We just were getting together and we were brainstorming.
No, I know, I understand.
And I would hate to spend up effort on something, and we've got experts out there thinking, those guys don't know what they're doing, asking us to do this.
That's why
They could-
that's why it's coming back in
They
this
could
format.
come back and say, don't focus on.
And along the lines, there may be some sort
I don't
of
know.
legal constraint against us
Yeah.
on what we want to accomplish, but we are handcuffed going down a certain path. We need to have that knowledge also.
But in the scope of economic development, in the scope of all the city's programs, the economic development program I presented to you tonight is very much in its infancy in Stillwater. That's why I mentioned parts of it started in '07, parts of it started in 2012, parts of it started in 2013. Now, we've been contracting the chamber for years, and so that's been an ongoing component, but we've kind of left that over there with the chamber in charge, and I think CETA is now at a point we want a lot of input in that. The CVB has been in operation since '85, or late '80s, and it's continued to grow, and it's growing and growing, and it's doing a wonderful job, but I think as a city-financed operation, CETA needs to be very, very aware of it. We need to be able to give guidance to where all of our programs are
Well,
on
there's
the
no
same
doubt.
page.
We are the only 5 people that are authorized to determine where a tax is spent within
Absolutely.
this city. And we are the only 5 people that are ultimately responsible for where a tax is spent in this city. And so we've got to know where it is, where it's going, and what's the criteria that it's used for.
And we need to be able to see some data that guides us.
Results.
The criteria
We
of
have
where
to
it's
see
going.
the data, which this is a good start, so we can get
Oh, yeah.
to how we need to get the data, because we can't govern if we don't have it.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work.
All right, so you did have a recommendation. Your recommendation was for us to...
I think an ad hoc committee of the trust would be helpful. It wouldn't-
I kind of like that. How about, could we deal with that next meeting? So I think there's some thought I think it needs to go into who that is, and more importantly, who doesn't want to do it.
Well, maybe all counselors want.
They may all want to do it. I don't know.
Well,
So
I wish we could. I mean, we can call a special meeting every time we want to.
I don't see that as very effective.
It gets a little.
But I'd like to see the input of those other folks before we go tearing off down the road.
Oh, yeah, I've got several questions from you tonight. We need to get all that data back together before you meet.
Without appointing and creating, does everyone like the idea of doing an ad hoc on this?
Be fine.
Okay.
The mayor's taking applications.
Depends on which way you want it to go.
Chairman.
So, anyway, okay, I like the idea also of doing the ad hoc. You be working with city staff and Lisa and kind of asking those questions, and by the time you get those answers, we'll be ready with an ad hoc committee.
Sure thing.
How's that?
Thank you.
You guys good? Okay, all right, thank you. Good stuff. Okay, next on general orders, professional consulting service contracts, City of Stillwater, and retail strategies. Ms. McLaughlin.
Now, remember, we're in the Consumer Development Division, not sales.
Good evening, Angela McLaughlin, Economic Director for Consumer Business Development. I did not prepare a big presentation tonight. I know usually by the time you get to me, you're a little bit tired. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review the report that was sent out and go through it a little bit. What I would like to do is just add to that a little bit, my position and why I think it's important to my office. And at the end of that, hopefully be able to answer any questions. And if I can't, hopefully City Manager Mr. Galloway can do so. So tonight I'm here to request additional funds for basically a consulting firm to work with us. We had a contract back in 2012 with another company, and oftentimes you will hear myself or Mr. Galloway refer to the leakage reports and the data and demographics that we had. It was with that partnership with that company. That contract expired last year, so right now we are using data that's really out of date. Some of our leakage reports really aren't current. So basically, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants right now. We are able to use some of the services provided by the chamber. Lisa and I have talked at length. They have a great website, and we're able to go on and look at available properties. In my opinion, that particular program, to me, is more geared to the industrial side and not necessarily fulfills the requirement of what my office would need.
Angela, was that the consultant that was looking at, consumer numbers inside the city of Stillwater,
Yes.
spending money in Edmond or Tulsa or whatever?
Yes.
What they were spending it on?
And the leakage report alone is such a valuable tool. And actually, I got this question last week after the development project went through on the north side. And it was someone from the public that asked, and it was a great question, and I always appreciate these. If the leakage was so great, why wasn't there somebody here already taking advantage of that? Well, the truth of the matter is they didn't have to, because we were spending our money in Edmond and Tulsa on those same services. So they were already capturing it. They just weren't capturing it in Stillwater per se. So what does that do to our local economy? We don't get the sales tax. You know, we go to Edmond and shop, and basically we're funding their fire department, their police department, their streets, all their utilities. So I think that when you break it down like that, it helps our local citizens understand a little bit better what leakage actually means. It's not a very nice term. It makes you think of other things, but that's what they call it. It is a great tool for me, though. What it helps also any of our city councilors or our city manager understand, for instance, I get this question a lot, why don't we have a high-end steakhouse? With a report like this, we can go in and hopefully, sometimes if it's a smaller chain, they would not be in this program, we could put in, for instance, a Charleston's. And that would tell us, is it a good match for our community? How much is leaving in that particular demographic? This was a very useful tool when we were talking to the major sporting goods stores. And that conversation has happened, well, for 2 years now we worked on that. So it is great when we go to set up our meetings, we can immediately present them with a report going, oh, and by the way, did you know that $16 million a year are being spent on tents in Stillwater, Oklahoma? It's a great way to get our foot in the door to those businesses. Something else, with our prior contract, I think that Mr. Galley would agree with me, we really were just paying for data. They didn't provide us very many more tools after that. So as we explored contracts with other companies, and there are a lot of companies out there, what we really needed was definitely more of a robust program, robust services. What I'm probably the most excited about is the representation that this particular company can provide to us. I go to 3 events a year to meet with restaurant, retail people, brokers, real estate people, developers. There's one in Oklahoma that is now going to an every other year program. We go to a very large one in Dallas, which has been very successful for us. And then we go to the large one in Las Vegas. This company goes to events like that every month. And while they're there, and if they're talking about Columbia, Missouri, they will also mention Stillwater. I honestly don't have the kind of budget to be able to go to those type of meetings over and over again. So by partnering with this company, and I can't be there, or maybe we just don't have the budget for it, they can also represent Stillwater. So to me, this is a very valuable tool. They're also going to recognize the fact that if they have a developer that's interested in college towns, oh, and by the way, a great college town in Stillwater, Oklahoma, you should really take a look at them. That's something that might not be readily available to me. We talked a little bit about this networking connections. As we met with Retail Strategies, and Dan and I had, I think, at least 5 meetings with these guys, one of the things that was very noticeable in their contract was the fact that they really work with so many different developers. They identify developers that would be interested in specific projects. And what I mean by that, let's take the North Side project that just went through. That developer really liked that it was just an open green field to work on, kind of specialized in that. You have other developers that really want to go in, let's say for the corridor project, and look at buying up large parcels and developing closer to the university. That's what they specialize in. And then you have developers that want to go in and repurpose older buildings. You guys know that I came from downtown. That's definitely where my heart still lies. And I think that anytime that we can find a developer to help us repurpose those old shopping centers or vacant buildings is a good thing. However, finding specialized developers can be a little bit challenging. When you hire a company like this, they already have an arsenal that we can go to, which is great. The door's open a little bit for us. Again, with the data that's provided with a service like this, when you talk about the large multi-million-dollar developers, sometimes they're able to access this. Our local developers, however, really don't know where to go to get this information. So when we were contracting and had that leakage report available, I provided it numerous times to different developers in and around Stillwater. In fact, small business owners would come in and go, you know, Angela, I really need to know the demographics. I don't understand what you mean by psychographics. Should I not be selling Swatch watches anymore? You know, and while we can't give them business advice, we can show them what the data is and say, you know, our demographics don't really support Swatch watches anymore, whatever the case may be. That's free to them. All they have to do is pick up the phone, call, email, or stop in my office. So to me, it's a very valuable tool for our local developers, business owners, and realtors. As I look through the points of consideration that Dan just went through, one of the things that we talked about, or that was talked about, was further development on the west side. How do we do that? Well, one of the things that we will do again with this leakage report is to understand better what is needed on that side. We can drop a pin at Country Club and Highway 51, put a 10-minute drive time around that, and it will pull the information and say, you know what? There's no restaurants in this area. We know that, but developers in Florida don't. We can show that information and go, this is why a restaurant would work on the west side. Look at the tremendous need. You and I get that because we live in Stillwater, but remember, many of the large developers that we're working with, they have no idea where Stillwater, Oklahoma is. So we have to be able to provide this information to them to make them understand that. It also will tell us probably what won't work in Stillwater. We look at high-end shopping, and on everybody, and I've done this at several presentations, what does Mayor Bartley consider high-end shopping compared to what John McClenney would consider high-end shopping? And I'm not picking on John, but it might be two different things. So
Much nicer than
much nicer. Probably camping, outdoors, high-end, I don't know. But it helps us say, will a Macy's work in Stillwater? Our demographics might not be able to support that.
Well, Angela, in that topic you're on right now, it was this type of information that led my brilliant idea of we need to go get Cabela's to open up, be the first, be in Stillwater, because they would be great, capture the whole state. And what we matched, 3 of the 39 criteria they look for?
It's basically a dating service if you want to look at it.
Idea.
This person wants X, Y, and Z, and we have X, Y, and Z, so we should get together and have that conversation. And a lot of times, for instance, I got asked today, I won't name any names, about a Papados in Stillwater. Oh, wouldn't that be great? But if you look at Papados and how they match up to Stillwater, right now we're not a very good match for them. They're just now going into the Oklahoma City and Tulsa markets. It also allows education of Stillwater residents. So when I do a presentation to the Rotary Club or the Board of Realtors and they say, hey, you know, I really want a P.F. Chang's, we can talk about why we don't have a P.F. Chang's, and I can be comfortable with showing them that information. It's not that we don't want P.F. Chang's, but right now we don't really fit into their business model. I think this all goes back to, again, everyone here, I think, is very passionate about the city of Stillwater. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. We really want this robust local economy to continue. And we talk about fulfilling the needs of our residents and our college students who have been very important. This will help us identify how we can fulfill those needs, what's doable and probably what's not doable. And if it's not doable, it's okay to talk about it. We don't have to be so hush-hush about it. And finally, I want to just to mention too, with that corridor redevelop project, we've had a lot of interest here lately about this particular project. In fact, things are starting to happen a little bit quicker than maybe we anticipated. I have some developers that are beginning to be very excited about the possibilities, a particular developer that specializes in that. We know that this type of data and working with this type of company can be very valuable. But it's not just the data. This company can actually go out and talk to property owners, help us identify who owns this parcel of land, and assemble those large parcels. So if someone wants to come in and develop an entire block at one time, they'll be able to do so. One house isn't going to be, that's not what we're looking for in this corridor project. We need developers to come in and assemble large parcels, a block, a 2 block at a time, to be able to tie from the university to downtown. you know I'm a one-person staff, trying to go out and work with the property owners, especially when we talk about rent homes and who actually owns the home. It can be very difficult. It also puts a neutral party on the field. We know if OSU comes in and wants to buy that property, what happens? It's oftentimes the same thing with the city of Stillwater. This is a neutral party. They can go in and talk to a property owner, and nobody tends to get up in arms too much. So my recommendation tonight, hopefully after some consideration on your part, and I hope that you've had a chance to review the references that we've provided, is to allocate the $50,000 for this current budget year, and then $25,000 for years 2 and 3. At this time, if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to try to answer them. I know I'll go through that really fast.
I think, Angela, you alluded to it, but this company does have a reputation and a track record of working with local developers. Right?
Yes.
If we have any local landowners or local developers who are interested in developing their property, they will actually come here, meet with us and those property owners, and try to match them up with leads on what our market would support to help that local landowner and developer do.
Absolutely. This is a younger company too. They're very aggressive and very excited to be partnering. Not what we had with our previous contract, let's just say that way. When we go to the larger shows too, this gives us a meeting place. So if they have maybe discussed us with whatever company, maybe Joseph A. Banks, we can use their booth to facilitate or to be a part of those meetings. If I set a meeting up on my own, let's say, for instance, like Home Depot, like we met with last year, we're able to use that booth to have those meetings, and they'll be there to help facilitate the process. So it really is a partnership. It's not just one person going out and doing all of this or another person going out and doing all of this. We really work hand in hand.
Any other questions for Ms. McLaughlin?
Can this company provide analytics at the end of the year, like we would ask you at the end of the year to provide what's been done and, what's come in? Can it provide analytics to prove its worth?
Absolutely. What's very interesting, compared to the company we used last time, and a lot of communities have used that, everybody complained there was a lack of communication. I mean, you basically signed up and you got that tool and that was it. What I heard the most out of the people that I talked to in and out of Oklahoma was the amount of communication you get with this company. They provide weekly reports. They will provide you a daily report if you would like, but they really are committed to making sure that you know what's going on at all time. In fact, you can log on, let's say that we sign this contract and a week later, and they will have a list of people they've already started talking to for us. So we can pull that at any time, which is great. One of the hardest things about this position is we talk about how do you judge the success, and we can look at sales tax revenue. That's great, but you can't really make public what so-and-so business has done in the past 2 years since this office has been created. But we can get analytics from them that shows what they've been doing. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Gina, I was really skeptical at first, and I did talk to 2 of the different cities who were references, and that came up over and over again. I mean, a study of 2 cities, but they were overboard on the communication, and one guy talked about the communication base camp. He thought it was just kind of silly at first, but this is what Angela...
That's exactly the tool that, yes.
Said I can look at it every day and see what they've done, who they've talked to.
And then if you can put a dollar amount to that, if you had to do it yourself and you can't do it, then I just think it shows...
Yeah.
It proves why we're spending the money.
You're exactly right. I can't. It's basically, you can equate it to have an accounting office without a calculator. I don't have the tools to be able to do this. I just don't.
We've explored that a little bit. I may have shared that with somebody, I don't know. But in order to do that analysis, you have to have access to some databases. I mean, it's maintained through credit card companies, through other services. And you can buy a license to access that, but those licenses start in the 6 figures. You want $100,000 a year. We're not a big enough entity to afford those kind of access licenses. But you contract with a company who's working for 30 cities they can justify that. But it's like the example, and it's not just about the Stillwater market. These markets drill down on sites, and it's like Angela said, somebody may want to look at a 20-acre site at 4800 West 6th Street, and they want to know what the 10-minute drive time market analysis is for that site, not for the center of Stillwater, not for Lakeview Point. They want to know for that site. And we don't have the tools right now to, pull up the data, run the analytics and say, okay, within an hour I can say, here's what it is, here's what the market is.
And I really want to reemphasize that point. And when we talk about Stillwater, we have to remember we're a population of 50,000. And at times when we talk to these larger retail restaurant people, you have to sell them on that 50,000. So oftentimes we don't really use that 10-minute drive time. We use a 30-minute drive time to show 85,000. So we like to use the numbers to our advantage because we have a tremendous pool. We're the center of commerce in this area. You get Perkins and Cushing and as far away as Drumright and Perry and Ponca City that drive here, but in a normal situation, they wouldn't do a 30-minute drive time. They would only do a 10-minute drive time. So it's important to us to be able to play with that. A year ago, we were talking to a movie theater out of, I believe they were Missouri, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. They wanted to see a 120-minute drive time. We're able to pull that up, with a click of the mouse. And to me, it also puts us at the level of some of the larger cities. We're not scrambling for that information. We can do it right then. And one final thing, this is information that's shared with the chamber, with the bid, if the CVB called up. We share our program. So if anybody needs it, we use this all the time. We have a great partnership. If it benefits Stillwater, it benefits all of us. So I think that's really the attitude we've all had.
That's good, nice to hear.
Yeah, it's true. I'm sure Lisa would stand up and say the same thing.
Thank you. To me, it really boils down to this is information we don't have but need. It's expertise we don't have but need. And it's connections we don't have but need in order to accomplish some of these goals of providing the demands that our citizens and people from outside of Stillwater are putting on Stillwater.
So you're saying we need it?
That's what I think, yeah.
We don't have it.
And we don't have it.
And we don't have it.
Just to let you know why this is on here, another reason. When I was talking about the budget, last year when we recommended the annual budget last year, we anticipated possibly having some of these kinds of contracts or at least data acquisition. And that's why we didn't spend all the money last year, because I never found a source that I was comfortable with. So this year we decided to recommend just the basic operating budget, and then when the right contractor came along, that's when we decided we wanted to come back here and let you know specifically why we want to add that into the budget. And so this was trying to be a little more open with how we're handling it.
So
But this isn't in the budget right now.
No, that's why we're asking for additional appropriation from the seated reserves for this contract.
We did meet with this company several times before the budget, but at that time, it took us a long time to explore a lot of companies and figure out the right way to go for this community. And, we talked about incentives, and they actually will come into a community if there's something on the table for an incentive package and go through what the developer is asking to make sure that that really is something that they need. That I wouldn't be able to tell you. I'm not sure what construction costs are to build a grocery store, but this is something they specialize in. We recently, I know the council had an incentive possibility come up for a hotel, and in that particular area, it really didn't fill a niche. However, we can use this data to show that might have been worth an incentive for downtown Stillwater if the company would have been interested in going there. We can use this data to help, if we're going to do an incentive, it will help support that.
What in the budget you're looking for appropriation? You said from CETA reserves. Is this going from a restricted account, or is this?
No, this is from the unrestricted. The use tax is basically close to $1 million, which goes into CETA this year to create your economic operating reserve. We budgeted for our programs. The two programs that would come out of that are Angela's and our contract with Chamber. So we only budgeted $400,000 for this year. So we're asking for another $50,000.
Got it.
Can you ask for specific things that we might want to bring in and say, no, we don't want any more of that?
This was a concern of Dan and I. When they came to the table to meet with us, it was like, oh, we'll talk to so-and-so. I'm like, whoa, we don't want to talk to Burger King. And we've had another company that was really aggressive that really, we'll talk to all these fast food places. Well, we really don't We don't need that. We would like you to be concentrated in this area. And it has been a concern that we're talking to individuals, that we want to really focus more on the whole development. And I think that this company will do that for us. They will not go out and talk to somebody that we have specifically asked them not to approach. Why waste their time with that if we don't want it and we don't really want to talk to them, then they're not going to.
I think I may, hopefully I sent an email to you. They had a presentation in Moline, Illinois, of their overall program. And if you look at that slideshow, there's a blank page in there, and that's where the trust comes in. As they prepare this data and work with us and communicate, there will be opportunities when we will take that market analysis and come back to see that and say, okay, here's 12 viable things that would work economically in this community. Where are our priorities? Which ones do you want to work with? And so you have that ability to rule out some.
One of the persons that I talked to today said that the thing that they liked was they compared their town to comparative town.
Absolutely.
That's built into the contract.
And that we should be right in on that process when they tell us what our comparable towns are, so we kind of know who they're comparing us to. That's the kind of city we want to be.
Any other questions?
So many of the, and I'm not, we talk with a lot of companies, and most of the retail development consulting companies want basically carte blanche to say, you agree to take whatever business we can bring. Yeah. And I don't want to do that. And I don't think this council or this trust will. I think we want to be selective. We want to try to attract those developments you think are in the community, are healthy for this community, and fill a needed niche to make the quality of life here better. And so we have that ability. And this company believes in that philosophy. So I like that.
Does this company specifically work with people, developers who only want to come to TIF districts?
Oh, no, they have a wide selection. I wouldn't say selection. They have a big networking group to fall into. When we met with these guys, it was, the corridor project was really important. And again, maybe it goes back to my downtown roots. But when we start to talk about Stillwater and how we're growing and changing, to me, the north side really, we're kind of at a point now we can draw the line in the sand. And unless we but change zoning, we're kind of full in that area unless somebody purchased some property. So how are we going to infill in town? How are we going to grow the west side and also the east side? Because with the new elementary school on the east side, I get a lot of Stillwater residents that ask, I want more variety, I want more opportunity. So we met with this company. We shared our concerns. We don't have to offer incentives to everyone. We don't. If that's what, that you work with, that's not for us. Stillwater's got tremendous opportunity. When the right company, business, restaurant comes in and fulfills something in that particular area, I think that the council will know at that point that we should maybe consider a TIF agreement or a smaller agreement like we do downtown. But they work with many, many more developers than I'm familiar with, so I would say that the answer would be no on that.
All right, so staff recommendation is to approve the contract and give you authority to
Yes,
sell it?
is to approve the appropriation and authorize me to sign the contract. Again, the contract wasn't in your packet. It's a basic contract. I've included the scope of services in your packet. I've asked Mr. Dorman to look at the contract and put it in our standard contract format. And it's for $50,000. The second and third year, I want to have a non-appropriation clause, so if you choose not to hire any company, you don't want to appropriate any money next year for any company, we'd have the right to do that. So it gives us some
I agree with that.
protection.
Do you, after the third year, do you?
We have the right to
negotiate
renew if
or
we choose to.
Continues to be
At the same 25.
the same 25,000? So move.
Motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation? Conversation?
I had a point, yeah,
Okay.
just real quick. And maybe you can alleviate some of my stress on this, but one of my concerns, or it's not really even that big of a concern, but I don't like that we didn't get any other options. And I understand that, obviously we're not up on everything that you guys are, but I just don't like the fact that I either have to vote yes on this or vote no. I would have liked to at least seen, I mean, you talked about several other companies, you said several other companies several times. I would have liked to see what other options there could have been, even though this is who you went with, that's great, staff recommendation. But I just feel like, from my perspective, it's, this company is all that there is, or I vote no. And so I just,
Great point.
from my perspective, and I may be alone on this, I just would have liked to see some other options, because maybe there was another company out there that maybe we would have wanted to talk about at least, but just kind of a concern for, especially when we're talking about this. I mean, I know there's so many different parameters for it, and so I just, my perspective would have liked.
There's a lot of companies that offer a lot of services, and we've partnered with one in the past, and then there's some that you don't get any services but that toolbox. And we explored that because at one time Dan and I were excited. We're like, wow, we found a way to save the city money, and it's going to be fantastic. And they allowed you to log on and look, and the system kept crashing, and the data really wasn't complete, and you were paying almost $1,000 to access at one time. Well, wow, and that's all you get, and if it's not correct, well, all your eggs are in one basket. But I agree. Take that in consideration next time.
Thank you.
Other comments? Okay, we got a motion and a second. And that is approved 5-0. It's the last item on our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn CETA?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn CETA. That's approved 5-0. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Professor Noble.
Welcome. I read pins all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, I'm sure you use that often. Hi.
I'm the SGA Public Affairs